Hello, everyone. I'm Kateri Salk. I am one of the co-chairs of the ASLO Awards Committee. Just wanted to make a quick plug. If anybody is enjoying these talks today, please consider nominating your colleagues. We are always very excited to receive more nominations for awards. I have the honor today of presenting the award for the Redfield Lifetime Achievement Award. The intent of this award is to recognize and honor major achievements in research, education, and service to community and society. It is named after Alfred C. Redfield for his foundational oceanographic research in marine biogeochemistry and beyond. I wanted to say a quick thank you to the ASLO Awards Subcommittee for the Redfield Award for their hard work in preparing this award and evaluating nominees. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Louis Legendre, Professor Emeritus at the Sorbonne University in France and Laval University in Canada. And he has been nominated today for his 5 decades of groundbreaking research into the interplay between physics, chemistry, and biology in the functioning of Earth's aquatic systems, as well as for his education and mentoring of generations of scientists, including 35 graduate students and 22 postdocs. The big challenge in introducing a Lifetime Achievement Award is there are many, many accolades and achievements that you've achieved over the course of your career, so I will try to summarize a few here. Dr. Legendre has over 270 peer-reviewed publications and over 50,000 citations, so a huge impact on the community. His work led to the paradox of stability in oceanography. He has quite literally written the book on numerical ecology and is also the author of a recent book called Earth, Our Living Planet. Among many other awards he has achieved or has received over his career, he is an ASLO Hutchinson Awardee. And I would greatly encourage everyone to read the wonderful award citation for Dr. Legendre for the Redfield Award. It provides a wonderful summary of all of his achievements over the course of his career. Importantly, Dr. Legendre reminds us to embrace the joy in our work and the communication of that work with others. So please join me today in welcoming and congratulating our Redfield Award awardee, Dr. Louis Legendre.
Yes, so I have entitled my presentation as Decades of Pleasure Conducting Research in Aquatic Sciences and Related Fields. And I am deeply honored, of course, to receive this award, and especially happy that this ceremony takes place in Montreal, because I was born in this city, and I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Montreal. And also I am very moved because ASLO has been my scientific family ever since I attended my first ASLO meeting in 1970. And since then I had been a member at large of the ASLO board. I have attended many ASLO meetings where I convened many scientific sessions, and also co-chaired an ocean sciences meeting for ASLO. And I received the ASLO Hutchinson Award, and I am an ASLO Sustaining Fellow. So I thank everyone very much who has contributed to ASLO excellence over the years. So I spent the first part of my career in Canada and the second in France. And after my PhD studies at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia in Canada, I did a postdoc at the University of Paris Marine campus in Villefranche on the French Mediterranean coast, where I subsequently spent 3 sabbatical years. And until year 2000, I was a faculty member at Laval University, which is located in Quebec City, 260 kilometers downriver from Montreal, where I had the pleasure of working in an excellent research and teaching environment, and where I am Emeritus professor since year 2002, because in year 2000, I took on the challenge of moving to France to create and lead during its first 10 years a new research group called Laboratoire d'Oceanographie de Villefranche. In English, the acronym is LOVE, and the English name will be Villefranche Oceanography Laboratory. And I'm very happy that LOVE is now very renowned for the high quality of its research. And now I am continuing my most gratifying research career at LOVE in Villefranche as Emeritus Professor of Sorbonne University. So throughout my career, my curiosity and also the circumstances have led me to conduct research in 5 interconnected fields, that is biological oceanography, marine biogeochemistry, earth system science, numerical ecology, and the theory of practice and research. And I will give you a few examples of my work in each of these fields. So in biological oceanography, I mostly worked on the functioning of planktonic food webs. They are controlled by physical, chemical, and biological mechanisms, and also their effects on larger organisms by combining different approaches that included a lot of field work in a variety of interesting and contrasting environment that included the open ocean, lakes, coastal and estuarine waters, atoll lagoons, and Arctic ice-covered waters and sea ice. And I did metallurgical work on photosynthesis, nutrient uptakes, and other topics, and used the conceptual and numerical models. So my understanding of plankton dynamics evolved over the years, and here is an example. In 1981, I had proposed to characterize the phytoplankton production potential of marine ecosystem by their frequency of stabilization and destabilization, introducing the paradox of stability. While sometime later, in 1990, I stressed the grazing effect of phytoplankton on the phytoplankton blooms and the significance of this for fisheries and the downward export of carbon. And still later, I quantified using modeling and global ocean data the effects of the competition for resources among microorganisms in the euphotic zone, identifying 3 microbial competition switches in these systems. So what we see here is an example of progress over 3 decades from conceptual models to quantified models. So I also conducted research on other aspects of biological oceanography, and I gave here 2 examples concerning drastically different types of marine systems. One, during 2 decades, starting in the late 70s, I carried out research on sea ice biota and ice-covered waters in the Canadian Arctic and also in northern Japan. And it was known at the time that sea ice harbored microalgae and microbial grazers, but little was known about the functioning and overall significance of this biota. So our generation of researchers changed the field by using oceanographic approaches, and as early as 1992, we produced as an international synthesis of the new findings that deeply influenced later research and is still steadily cited. And then, since also the mid-1980s, I also conducted research on tropical coral reefs. And one of the results is in 2019, an international group to which I belong published a study based on the 20-year record of coral recruitment, in which we evidence a global tropical decline and subtropical increase over 20 years, which suggested that coral recruitment shifted towards the poles as ocean temperatures rose. And this is, I think, a remarkable example of a biological oceanographic response to climate change. So my work in aquatic food webs led me to investigate their roles in biogeochemical fluxes of elements, especially carbon, in the water column. And for many years, I studied various aspects of biogenic carbon fluxes into the pelagic food webs, respiratory CO2, and the ocean interior. And an example of her early conceptual work in 1989 is presented here, in which we proposed a bifurcation model of carbon export. So as climate change became a major concern for researchers and the society in general, I progressively focused on water column carbon remineralization and long-term sequestration, leading to many publications and ocean carbon pumps. And in the most recent of these papers in 2024, I proposed a jigsaw puzzle framework that is shown here, which unifies the three biologically driven carbon pumps. And I also participate in research on biogeochemical aspects of marine carbon dioxide removal, which may be required to achieve carbon neutrality. So whilst over the last decades, the community was primarily focusing on surface waters and downward carbon export of carbon, myself, I prioritized the study of remineralization and sequestration fluxes throughout the water column. And since the 1980s, I summarized in conceptual diagrams the effects of plankton groups or on biogeochemical flows of carbon in the euphotic zone. And here is an example of version 2004 version of a diagram of which I had published previous versions, and in which carbon is flowing from three size classes of primary production, that is larger and smaller than 5 micrometers, and dissolved organic carbon, to three carbon pools, that is short and long-lived organic carbon and sequestered biogenic carbon. And in this diagram, the carbon flows are mediated by organisms from bacteria to macrozooplankton. And interestingly, it is the first mention in the literature that carbon is sequestered in the water column as long-lived dissolved organic carbon, which was later termed the microbial carbon pump. So more recently, we estimated using modeling the century scale flux of carbon sequestration in the form of CO2 throughout the ocean driven by the biological pump. And what we found is that the maximum sequestration flux generally occurs above 2,000 meters and even above 1,000 meters. And given that previous studies had estimated this sequestration flux solely deeper than 1,000 meters, the values we published were much higher than were previously thought. So this is an example of progress over 2 decades from conceptual modeling of carbon fluxes to quantitative estimates. So as an aquatic scientist, I develop ideas about the Earth system, given that aquatic environments cover most of the Earth, and life primarily evolved and diversified in these environments. So in this respect, I had the pleasure of writing with my colleague Philippe Bertrand the book Earth, Our Living Planet, which addresses the co-evolution of Earth and organisms, combining astronomy, biology, chemistry, climatology, geology, ecology, and oceanography, and physics. It was real fun to write. And an example of this co-evolution is the fact that biological activity has driven changes in atmospheric concentration of methane and oxygen throughout the Earth history. So several aquatic biogeochemical processes need to be considered with an Earth system perspective because they interact with atmospheric and land processes. And one example of that is marine carbon dioxide removal, which I mentioned earlier. So part of my research involves extracting ecological information from large data sets. And already during my PhD studies in the 1960s, I implemented numerical methods on the university mainframe computers. Yes, they existed in 1960. And this is an example, this is the type of computer that existed at the time. And later, my brother Pierre was in this room, and I realized that we had complementary experience with these methods. And we had the groundbreaking idea of sharing of our knowledge with colleagues and students who often struggled to apply such methods and to make numerical sense of their calculations. And to this end, we decided, despite the fact that we were quite young at the time, to write a book in which explanations would be clear and simple, and all examples will be drawn from the ecological literature. So we called Numerical Ecology, we called the numerical analysis of ecological datasets numerical ecology, which gradually became a new scientific discipline. And over the years, we published 2 editions of our book in French and 3 in English. And these, all editions together, have been cited now more than 3,000 times in the scientific literature. So we wanted, Pierre and I, to create a new approach that will be useful to the community, and we are very happy that we were successful. So, like many other researchers, I had developed my own ideas about the scientific research process, and I wish to share these ideas with colleagues and students. So when I received the ASLO Hutchinson Award in 2002, I stressed the importance of pleasure in the research process during my acceptance speech, which was later published in the Limnology and Oceanography Bulletin. And this speech and other events that took place during the same period prompted me to publish in 2004 a book that was titled Scientific Research and Discovery Processes, Consequences, and Practice. And over the following years, I enjoyed publishing articles on this topic, including a food for thought paper on the pleasure of writing in 2021. And in the same vein, I'm delighted to announce that my brother Pierre and I are currently writing a new book on this topic, which we provisionally titled The Research Process in the Natural Sciences, Fundamentals and Practice. So in a few years' time, or it should be available. So in conclusion, the previous slides, I think, have shown that the pleasure has been a driving force behind my scientific career, in line with the message I conveyed when I received the ASLO's Hutchinson Award in 2002, that the pleasure is a key component of scientific research. And over the years, I have become convinced that it is not useful to try to provide a different explanation for each specific case under investigation, but instead that we should use these specific cases to test, challenge, improve, and develop scientific theories and paradigms. And finally, as I wrote in my Food for Thought article on the pleasure of writing, I encourage everyone to give in to the pleasure of writing scientific publications, including books for those who are up to it and even young researchers. So I thank you very much for your kind attention, and when you visit France, please come to the Villefranche Oceanography Laboratory.